Injuries from the past leave scars. However, I think there's a point in your life where the wounds do not break open easily, and they're just faded scars, still with you, but they're not the same. They're not exposed the way they once were. This gospel is such a beautiful gospel. I find it to be so interesting. Nicodemus has one line in this gospel, and then it's really not about him at all. It's about Jesus, of course. But the whole gospel is about truth and coming to the light and coming out of darkness. And I just think it's interesting that Nicodemus is in this gospel because of what we know about him, sort of coming at night and his history. And so I feel like what we're being invited to in this gospel is to bring our wounds to the Lord and to bring our sin to the Lord and to come from darkness to light. Growing up in an alcoholic home is really difficult. And especially when you are around a lot of people that seem to have a really normal life. I felt like most of my life we were living a secret. And it was a secret that had to be protected. And it greatly wounded me and greatly impacted me. The way that the relationship that I had with my dad was a very superficial, artificial one where I was longing for a connection, but I felt like I couldn't have connection with him. And essentially my mom, in protection of him and also lost in her own addiction, kept a distance from my sister and I. And I feel like most of my life, even into my adult life, she really made it clear that she was mom and not a friend. And so as an adult, it's a really painful experience now that my mom has passed to not ever get to have had an adult relationship with her. It's something that I grieve, and I don't get to talk to her about it, and it's not so much that she's gone, which is hard, it's the fact that the relationship that we never had is what I really grieve. And I do have a good relationship with my dad now, but it is still wounded and a little bit guarded. So of course, as a parent, you think that you're gonna do everything different than your parents, and it's your opportunity to make things right and correct all the mistakes that your parents made. And Eric and I found ourselves in a situation that I never ever would have expected when we found out that our children had been sexually assaulted by our babysitter. It was absolutely devastating. I would call it a faith crisis for me. I feel like there's nothing worse as a parent than to feel like you cannot protect your children. It is an absolute loss of control. It's like the only thing that we can do in this world is protect our children. And if we can't do this, I felt like I was powerless as a mom. Like my value as a mom, my worth as a mom, I completely lost that for many years. Feeling like I had absolutely nothing to give because, who was I that this horrible thing had happened in my family? So I was raised Catholic, and I was very involved in my faith as a young child. In fact, I was, just did all the retreats in high school and just very involved in my faith life. I went to college and I had kind of your typical party life, but I went to a Catholic college, so I had the party life and then also worked in campus ministry, right? And it was very interesting because I met my husband, who was agnostic pretty much and had no faith background. And I remember feeling like there was something wrong with my family because here I had all this dysfunction and all of this background, and I thought maybe I had been duped, that Jesus maybe really wasn't real because my husband's family seemed to be so perfect and none of them had any faith. So we got married and I was slowly kind of eroding. I guess my faith was slowly eroding at that time. So I was culturally Catholic. We got married in the Catholic Church. I would attend Mass now and again, but I stopped going a little bit here and there. And then when my kids were assaulted, it was like absolutely like the rug was torn out from underneath me. And I basically rebelled in the biggest way you could ever possibly rebel. I did everything opposite. I believed everything opposite of the Catholic Church. I was mad at the church, I was mad at God, I was mad at my family, I was mad at everybody else for what had happened. And it took me a very long time to slowly come back into faith. And essentially what happened was I had had a very great experience at Catholic school. And I felt here at St. Michael's that I was loved by my teachers. I felt through my experience with Catholic education that even though I had this chaotic family life and it was not really a safe place, this was always a safe place. And so I wanted my kids to have that experience. So what led me back to the faith was actually putting my kids in Catholic school. Because even though I didn't know what I believed and I wasn't really sure, I was kind of the belief that my kids will find their own faith and it's okay whatever they find. But Catholic school's good and it's a loving environment, and so we're gonna do this. And anyway, I had a pretty profound conversion or reversion experience that happened over several years, but there were a few main encounters that kind of led to that big conversion for me. The very first confession I went back was an absolute disaster. I had a friend invite me to confession, and I had not been in 15 years, and I went to confession and I got into a fight with the priest in the confessional. And it's really funny, but he gave me the penance of reading the Prodigal Son. And I remember going out into the pews and saying, like, this is why I hate the Catholic Church and I will never be back, but I'm gonna go ahead and do my penance before I leave. And so I went out, opened my Bible, read the penance, and then just started bawling because I realized that it was like for me. Confession is a beautiful place of mercy and something that I used to be really afraid of, and now I just can't wait to go to confession. I think for every person, confession is a place where you walk in and you feel intimidated, scared. I mean, I still, there's never a day, no matter the most horrible sins I've confessed that are in my past, there's never a day that I don't feel clammy and sweaty like going into confession. And yet I always go out knowing that I've had this amazing encounter. Intimacy with the Lord is scary and revealing, and we have to unveil ourselves and be willing to show him all of our wounds and our nakedness. But how else can we be intimate if we don't come to him fully unveiled, all of who we are, unafraid?